All right. Good morning. It's been quite a while since I've last streamed, and I decided today for the first time that you guys get to look at me uh, while I'm streaming. So, welcome. Um, Today, it's been a while since I've streamed, as I mentioned, and I asked the Discord server what people might be interested in having me stream about today. Um, I've been pretty busy with my recent job and I've been very absent from the server in general, but I decided that I wanted to start creating content again. And so I figured what better way to start than by asking, what people might like to see now that it has been a period of time since I've been around. I keep up with the chat fairly well, but I don't really deep dive into any of the things that people are talking about specifically related to cabinet vision. So I really needed some input from the community in general to see what might be the best thing for me to stream about. And wouldn't you know it, not a whole lot has changed. People still really want to know a lot about reporting. And I've done a few report streams already, but I figured I would just kind of start something more or less from scratch. I have a feeling what most people are struggling with relating to reports is less about the SQL queries and more about Combit itself. Combit is fairly, I don't know, I don't want to say challenging to learn, but it takes a good bit of trial and error to try to figure out what's going on with it. As I've mentioned in other streams, there is absolutely a free trial that you can get of Combit to download. And with that download, you can go through the help exercises and learn quite a bit about it. But not everybody has time or desire to do that. And so I'm just going to go ahead and show you guys kind of how I use it. And I know that there are better ways to use it. This obviously is not going to be a video about the best possible ways to use Combit within Cabinet Vision to set up reports, but I'm going to share some of the things that I like to do, the types of things that over time I've kind of fallen into the habit of doing. And just, I guess I'm just going to talk a little bit about why I find the things that I like to do to be helpful or beneficial, and hopefully you guys appreciate it. Um, as you can see at the top of my screen here, I have Stream Project 626. I was planning on doing the stream a while back, but life is just, it's honestly, it's pretty hectic for me. So I didn't really get around to doing it when I wanted to, but I also didn't want to let this completely pass me by without actually doing a stream. So here we are. And what I'm going to stream about today, particularly with reports, is I am going to show you guys how to build a report that is strictly related to rooms and the types of things you have going on in these rooms. So when I say that, by the way, I am actually streaming on a pretty much completely fresh vanilla copy of 2024. So I don't really have anything. I mean, I literally have nothing. I think I might have just like one UCS for finishes. Um, I don't even really remember why I did this. I was helping somebody on the Discord server with something. So this UCS isn't even going to play a role in what we're doing today. I'm going to use all of the default things that come with Cabinet Vision, and I'm going to show you how to build a report that is going to display a lot of the different things that exist within an individual room. I'm just going to pull just the rooms table. We're not going to focus on any joins. There's not going to be any real SQL anything. I'm just going to go through, use the built-in tools from Cabinet Vision without writing an SQL query, and from there we're going to build a report that displays a bunch of this different stuff. So I don't remember what all is available for selections from the rooms table, but I think we'll be able to pull the cabinet construction method, the drawer box construction method, the rollout construction method. We should be able to pull all of these materials shown here on the materials tab. I think we can pull the pull schedule, the drawer guide schedule, the hinge schedule. We could probably even pull the beaded frames profile if I had one. I don't think I have a bead profile on here. The sliding door rail schedule will probably show up as well. I have something in my eye. And then we should also be able to pull each of these selections for the doors. We might even be able to pull flute information, and we might be able to pull layout information. I believe that everything for both cabinet and closet is going to be available. I think we can also pull these different values for countertops, and I'm nearly positive we can pull everything for the molding. So this is going to be a pretty, I don't want to call it basic, but ultimately anybody who has cabinet vision should be able to follow along with this and produce more or less the same report. So all I've really done before I started today was I created 2 rooms, and they both just have one cabinet in them. And what I do know I did was I believe I set the finishes. So I set the interior of this one, but I left the exterior to the system bone color, but I'll just go ahead and pick pine dark for this. Obviously this is pretty hideous and you probably won't be coloring your cabinets this way, but it's an interior and an exterior finish. And then on the first room, I have set the exterior finish, but I left the interior finish as well. We'll go ahead and make that system amber for the interior. So the point of this really is just to have an interior and an exterior finish color. And just a couple of rooms so that we can see how this sort of breaks down while we're in the report editor. So this is it, just simple, vanilla, out of the box, cabinet vision. I will go ahead and change the hinges for the job to an inset hinge, which should let me set up bead profiles. And so what we'll do here is for room 1, I'm going to set up a bead profile that is the sample bead. And then for room 2, I'm going to set up a bead profile that is the step bead. So just so they each have a little bit of a different bead profile going on. You can see it here is the bead profile. Again, there's really nothing at all special or unique about this. This is just right out of the box cabinet vision. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to go to reports and then click on report center. So I'm going to jump right into setup reports. And I believe I created this group called rooms. I don't think by default this group for reports exists. And you can do that by clicking add, and then you just enter the name for the report group. Again, if I just called this rooms 2, for example, it's going to show up over here. I'm going to delete that because I don't need that. But I also have this sort of sample report that I was tinkering with a little bit, but we're not going to use this. I'm actually going to show you how to build one completely from scratch, right? So brand new report. So what you do is you'll click on new report, and immediately you're going to get this advanced properties window. And so this is where you can name your report, which is what you're going to see in this list here. So I'm going to call this room information. And then the description can be whatever you want. The description is what's going to show up over here in this column under description. I'm not sure if this has been fixed with 2024 or not, but there is definitely a bit of a character limit you can put into the description field. It seems to me like when you copy a report, you can fit more into the description than you can by default right here typing it in, but I'm just going to put basic information about rooms and their contents. Now, this is not going to be a label report, so I'm going to leave that as false. It's not going to be a catalog report. I'm going to leave that as false, and I'm not estimating any materials, so I'm also going to leave that as false. I don't have any part graphics I'm trying to show, so I'm just going to leave all of this at the default. And this is under the properties tab, by the way. So we don't need to do any imports. We are going to need to create a table. But before I do this, I'm going to show something that I've kind of gotten into the habit of, which is creating a variable to carry the name of the report into the report. So I'm going to go ahead and just add a variable. And I'm going to call this report name. This is not my original idea. This is something that I picked up from some of the reports that were done, I think, by Andrew Ryby way back when, or maybe Brian Shonwell. I'm not sure. But you want the type to be text, and the value here is what we're going to use. So be mindful of the fact that even though I'm naming the report room information, I should fix that typo. It's gonna drive me nuts. This name here doesn't actually translate to this report name. So if you want the name that shows up in your list here to be what shows up on your report, then copy the room information or the name of your report, just copy it from here and go to your variables and paste it into the value. And again, make sure this is text. This is the name that's going to show up when I actually run my report, and then the name of the variable that I'm going to use to basically get this information within the report. I'm just calling report name, so it's very obvious what I'm trying to look for. So the next thing I'm going to do is create a table. Come up here and click this button here, select fields to include in the report. This is how you create a table individually within your report, which is going to contain the information that you can display while you're in Combit. So this create table wizard, I don't really use a lot of these tabs, to be completely honest, but when you click it, immediately it's going to skip past the source tab, because the source with most of your reports is going to be coming from report.mdf or whatever at the time of, whichever version of Cabinet Vision you have. It could be a slightly different source, but either way, when you create a new table from the report center, it's almost always going to skip past the source tab and just go straight to the select section. So what we're doing here is you're going to click this drop down and you are looking for rooms. All of these tables here are the default tables that exist in report.mdf. I'm not going to go into what that means. Maybe in a different video, I'll show how you can look at these different tables and see what the different fields are for these different tables that you can use in your reports by default. But in this particular case, I'm just going to use rooms, which is a default table that exists within report.mdf whenever you're running Cabinet Vision. Now, it is worth noting the report.mdf database or data source, or whatever you want to call it, is populated by the information that exists within the job that you have up. So every single time you open a new job, you might have heard people talking about reports.mdb, like the data gets flushed every time you enter the report center. What that means is that all of the information that was already loaded into report.mdf is going to get dumped and then reloaded with the current information contained within the job file that you are in at the time of clicking on report center. So if you've heard people say it gets flushed and repopulated, that's what they're meaning. They're meaning that it's going to dump all the old information from whatever the last job was, or from whatever the information was contained within the job since the last time you went to the report center. Like maybe you only had 2 rooms, but then you were in the job and you were adding more rooms. You've got 4 rooms now. When you come into the report center, it's going to just delete or drop or flush all of the information that was contained in report.mdf before, and it's going to repopulate so that now you have all 4 rooms of information to pull from. So we're going to click rooms here. You click the plus button after you select the table that you're trying to pull from, and this is going to make the fields in this table available by defining its relation to other fields. Now, it's not going to by defining its relation to other fields. We're not going to be creating any relationships or joins in this, so that second part is not really accurate. All we're trying to do here is just select the information that we want to see on our report. So if you scroll down this list, there is a lot of the things that I was showing you before that might exist within your report. There's the exterior finish, the interior finish, top finish, splash finishes, crown, you know, light rail, baseboard, chair rail, all of these finish values here, right? Everything that ends with fin is going to be related to finishes. A little bit further down, we've got cabinet construction, drawer box construction, rollout construction, base cabinet materials, so on and so forth. So generally these fields are self-explanatory, right? These all end in construction. These are going to be construction methods for the assemblies or drawer boxes or rollouts in your room. And then we've got materials here, which are going to list all of the different materials, your pull materials, your hinge materials, guide materials, all of that. From here, you get to like your wall cabinet door name. So if you've got specific names for your door styles with pre-selected outside edge, inside edge, routes, and stuff like that, and you've named it something, that's where you're going to pull it from. It's like right here. This will be for what you've set your wall cabinets to. This will be what you set your drawer fronts to, your base doors to, your end panel names, your tall panels, so on and so forth. And then you also have material. So if you have a door that you could build out of oak or poplar or maple, or maybe it's a foil door or an MDF door or whatever, this door material field is going to populate with the information that you've selected for that room. So as you can see, you can get a pretty big picture of what you've got selected for each room individually by going through here and picking the things that you want to select. There's a lot of stuff in here. We've got the entire closet selections. We've got countertop construction, material profile, profile material. There's crown profile material. So every single one of those molding selections you can make, you will be able to see which profile you have selected for the room, as well as the material that you have selected for that profile for the room. Now, the caveat to this is that any overrides you make are not really going to populate here. So if you draw a molding in a room and then you right click on that molding and you change it because you didn't set your room profile or your room properties correctly to be what you want, or for example, you might have multiple profiles within a room, this is going to break down from there. You have to get a little more creative if you want to be able to show like individual overrides of things. But we're going to base this idea, we're going to base this stream today on the idea that it's only going to be one profile and one material per room. So again, as you get down here to the bottom, ceiling profile material. I think that this is literally the ceiling molding selection. Anyway, so what you can do here, if you know exactly what you want to report on, you can go through and hold control and pick and choose the different things that you want to have show up, right? If you only want to have a few different things show up, you can do that. But one of the easier ways to handle this is going to be to just click at the top, scroll all the way to the bottom, hold shift and click at the bottom. And that's going to select everything in this entire list. And then you click this arrow, and that basically says, I want all of this information to be included within my table query. So if you wanted to go through and group and where and sort and filter all of these things, which are parts of the SQL query, like let's say you only wanted to see rooms where the name started with, final or something like that. Like maybe you drew several different versions of a room and you're in the habit of always starting your rooms where you're actually going to cut them with the word final or something. You could click on this where tab and you could add, where rooms.name starts with final or contains final or something. But again, we're not trying to really focus on SQL in this video. We're really trying to get into Combit, where I'm going to show you how I like to set up reports. So from here, I've got everything selected and I'm just going to click OK. And what that's going to do is it's going to create a table up here called rooms, because that was the name of the table that I selected and I didn't change the name of it. You can change the name if you want. You can call it my rooms or whatever. And when you change that name, it changes the name of the table over here. But unless you have a really good reason for doing that, my preference is just to leave it as the default. Now, this is where, again, you can see the data source, which is report.mdf. I'm going to be completely honest. I never really messed with provider. So if this is something that you want to know about, I'm not the guy to talk to. Cabinet quantity is going to be more for if you're reporting cabinets that exist in a room. And this is a separate SQL query for giving you that, it'll tell you what cabinet something exists within and how many of that thing exist within the cabinet. So if you had, 4 doors that were the same size in cabinet one, and you wrote the right kind of cabinet quantity query here, then you would have a field within your design, within the report design, where you could call the cabinet quantity value. It's a little complicated, but again, we're not going to get into that. And then RIP summary would be related to if you're trying to show lengths of different lumber products, for example. We're not going to be doing any of that. We're not creating any lists, and I'm not going to do any fixed sorts or sort fields here. But what I am going to do is explain briefly this filter section. So since all we're really reporting is rooms, all we really need to have here is going to be the right room ID field for us to be able to filter in case we don't want to see every single report when we're actually looking at the report. So if you're familiar with running reports, you can filter, individual cabinets or rooms or whatever. If you don't fill this field with something, you're not going to be able to use your filter within the standard Cabinet Vision interface. So in this particular case, you could go with room.roomID, or you could go with room.roomNumber. I think you can use room.roomID, but I use rooms.roomNumber here. So just type in rooms.roomNumber. And if you're wondering where that comes from, if you click on this SQL tab over here, don't be overwhelmed by this huge string of information, right? But room ID is one of those fields I was telling you about, and rooms.roomNumber is one of the other fields I was telling you about. So this is our select clause, which is all of the fields that we're trying to pull into this report. And this is the table from which we're pulling those fields. So from rooms, so rooms.jobid, rooms.roomid, rooms.roomNumber, rooms.roomName, so on and so forth. So if you set this room ID field to rooms.roomNumber, then you're going to be able to use the filter within Cabinet Vision. I'm not going to get into any of this concatenate section because we don't need any of this for what we're trying to do. At this point, we've done everything we need to do in the properties portion of creating a report. We've got our table with all the information, and we've created a variable called report name. So from here, I'm just going to click close, and it's going to take us right into Combit. So the first thing I recommend doing with this is going to be to decide what the layout is for your report. Do you want this to be a landscape sheet? Do you want this to be a portrait sheet? And depending on how many fields you're reporting, that's probably going to determine how you want to lay this out. Because we're going to be reporting several things within a room, maybe the name and the exterior finish, the construction method, and maybe a couple of other things, you have to think about actually reading this report. Now, if you're reading it digitally, this is less important because you can make your font pretty small and you can zoom in and you can read it fairly well. But if this happens to be a report that you ever plan on printing out, you should be mindful of how small the font is going to have to be in order to get all of the different fields in place that you're looking to report on. Most of the reports that I do, I set up as landscape. And you can do that by coming up here to the project tab, and you've got your page setup section here. So if you just click landscape, it's going to reorient your report. So now it's rotated sideways instead of the portrait view, right? From here, you need to decide how you really want this report to lay out. I feel like it's a good idea for every page of every report to list sort of a header, if you will, that explains what the report is, gives you, page one of however many pages you've got. I like to include the engineer's name in the report as well, and I like to include the job name in the report. You can add other stuff if you want to, but those are the things that I feel are very, very important to include on every single report. So the first thing that I like to do is I like to insert text. And you can draw, you click and drag and basically draw your text field, if you will. And from here, you've got a couple of options. You can start typing right here right away and pull one of the fields if you are familiar enough with your query. So like if you wanted this to be rooms, room name, well, that's not showing up because I haven't set a data source yet. So let's go back before I do that. With your project, sorry, I got a bit ahead of myself. Actually, the first thing you need to do is insert a container. And so that would be done by clicking here, insert report container. You want to go to insert report container, and this is actually where you're going to want to click and drag for basically the entire sheet. So you've got a couple of options here. Generally speaking, you're just going to want to add a table. So I'm going to click on table, and we can select here now all of the different fields that we want to have show up in our table. Now this can be a decent way to get your table layout started, but it can also be a little bit frustrating at times. Because there's a lot of stuff here. You might not know exactly what you're looking for, but let's just assume that what you wanted to start with is you'd like to have the room name. You'd like to have the room number. You'd like to have the room description. I'm going to go ahead and actually put the description after the name. So we'll go name, description, room number. And then from here, it's really about what do you want to see? And so I've selected interior and exterior finishes for my room. So I'm definitely going to show interior and exterior finishes. So that's going to be exterior finish, interior finish. And then you can also select your exterior door finish. I don't think you can select your, let's just forget I said e-door fin because I don't recall precisely what that is, but let's say the exterior finish, the interior finish, and let's say we want to give some information on which construction method was selected. And then let's just go with our base cabinet materials, which I'm double clicking on these fields to get them to show up over here, by the way. You can click on them and click the arrow to move them over as well if you want. I'm going to go with base cabinet materials. I'm going to go with wall cabinet materials. And I'm going to, let's see, is there anything else I really care about? I'm actually also going to go with drawer box construction, and I'm going to move that under my cabinet construction. And I'm also going to get my rollout construction. I'm going to move that under my drawer box construction. So while I'm at it, I'm also going to go ahead and pick my drawer box materials because I'd like to see those. I'm going to pick my rollout materials because I would like to see those as well. So the order that you create these columns in is going to be the way that your table gets laid out by default. I don't want this to get too much busier than this. This is already a lot of information to include on one report. So we'll just end at this. From here, if you cared about it, you could name each line individually. But most of these field names are self-explanatory enough, in my opinion, that I don't want to, or I don't really care about naming the line itself. So from here, as long as we're in here, if you click on any one of these columns that you've added, and you decide you don't want to have it in here, you can just click the X and it'll remove it before you click OK. Once you click OK, it's going to generate a table, and removing the columns is a little more complicated. Not too bad. So from here, I'm just going to click OK, and now we've got a basic table layout. If you double click on any of these, well, let's look over here real quick. As I was saying before, we have a report container, and contained within that report, we have a table. If you select the table and you scroll up to the top, you've got a field here called data source. Data source is going to be basically the table that you selected for creating this. If you happened to have more than one table that you added in the report properties earlier, you can click this button. It's basically letting you know you're changing the data source of the table. If you do that, some of these fields are probably not going to report correctly anymore. Click OK. If you had more than one table, you could pick a new table from here. We've only got one, so it doesn't really matter, but I figured I'd show how you can actually change the data source if you want to. So from here, we've got all of these field headers, if you will. So let me just jump out of the report designer real quick and show you what all of this is going to look like without doing anything else. We're going to see all of these headers shown across the top, and then we're going to see rows for each room that exists within our job because of the way that the query worked. So what we'll see when we go to the actual report at this point is you'll see room 1, all of this as we're seeing it, but then beneath it, you'll see room 2 with different information contained within it. So save your work and then click the X to close it. Now, before you can actually run this report, you have to enable it in one of the report groups. So the way you do that is you select whichever report you're working on, and you check the box over here for the group that the group under which you'd like to see the report. And you'll notice it turns, the little silhouette of the person turns green. That basically lets you know that this report is something that you can actually report. If it's a gray background, like this room checklist, you can't actually run that report anywhere because you have not assigned it to any groups. Another way you can see is under this groups column. You can see at a glance which groups any of these reports are assigned to by default. And last but not least, this is pretty common information, but I'll share it. If you have a report that has one of these cabinet vision icons, this is a default stock report that ships with the software. You actually can't edit them. If you try to edit them, it's going to create a copy of the report. It's going to be exactly the same as the report exists, but it will be a copy so that all of your stock reports remain intact, right? That way, if you need technical support or something, when your reports isn't working, the cabinet vision technical support team can basically know what they're expecting rather than having a custom report that they're going to have to figure out. So anyway, I've set the room information report we've created to the rooms group. And from here, I'm going to click return, get back to the report center. You select the rooms report group, and it's going to display it automatically. Now, there's only one room showing here. That's because I've only got one room selected in my filter. And this was something I did earlier. I deselected room 2 from my filter. But if we check room 2, now we're seeing both rooms listed completely. So if we had not added I'll just show this. In report properties, under tables and rooms, if we had not added this field, the room ID field for the filter, then the filter that I'm trying to use here should not work. I might make a fool of myself and it might actually still work for some reason, but yeah, see, now even though I've selected I don't want to see room 2 through my filter, room 2 is still showing up because I didn't tell the report how to filter the rooms out. So I'll go back in here, put that field back in, because I want to be able to filter by rooms. And Come back out here and you'll notice once again, if I want to, my filter stays intact. I'm only going to see the rooms that I want to see. All right, so let's go back into setup reports and back into design report, because this is not super useful the way this is set up. It's kind of, it just doesn't really give us a whole lot. So there are some things that I like to do to size my report container and my tables within the report container. So if you click on the report container itself, over here under, and you're in the objects tab, or rather it's just by default down here in the properties tab, sorry. There's a position section here. You click the little arrow and it'll expand so that you can see you've got left, top, width, and height. Generally speaking, I like my reports to be set up to, how do I say this? Layout regions, standard layout. The only printer I have selected for this computer is Microsoft Print to PDF, but I like to force paper size, and I also like to have basically use printer settings for duplex, force paper size, yes, and then keep scale. These are the things that I generally like to have set up for my layout. And then a lot of times your printer by default is going to have margin settings. So if I was connected to a printer where I had margins, I'm not going to go try to set up Microsoft PDF real quick to show margins, but if you did, then what you can do is you can come in here to this left field and you can go to variables, LL, which stands for list and label, device, page. You can go to size for your page, or you can go to printable area offset, CX. So this is the printable area offset, or the margin on the left and the right. If you double click that, it's going to populate with a specific value. Now again, because I'm using Microsoft Print to PDF, there are no margins by default. So it's just going to force it to 0, but that's okay for the sake of this. I'll go ahead and use this anyway, because I pretty much always use the printable area offset to set my left right of my report. And notice it just slammed it over to 0. And I do the same with the top. I just happen to know that CY is the printable area offset in the Y direction. So I'm going to copy the field from the left and just paste it into the top and replace the X with the Y. So again, you can see now I'm just slammed all the way up to the top and all the way over to the left. From here, I like to set my width to be the printable area size, CX. And that's going to set it up so that you're at the absolute width of your printable area. And I like to also set the height to be size CY. Now it's parametric to the paper size that you use to print from. Generally speaking, whenever possible, try to make everything you do in Cabinet Vision parametric, as long as it's not going to take you longer to do. So, so we're set up so that we're just basically maximizing our space on this paper with respect to the margins. And again, because I don't have margins set up on my Microsoft Print to PDF, it's just going the full width and height of the document. As you can see here, it's 11 wide by 8.5 tall. Now, what I like to do at this point is I like to give myself some space at the top for a header. Now, however much space that is going to be up to you. It just depends on how much space you want for your header, what you want your header to look like. So I'm going to go ahead and just set it to be like, I'm going to give myself an inch of space at the top. And the way you can do that while keeping this parametrically set up is you can go to the height and you can just type -1. If you are, or rather +1, sorry. If you're localization settings for your computer are metric, then you're going to be doing, 25.4, which is the equivalent of 1 inch, or, maybe you just want 25 millimeters at the top or whatever. It's up to you. But because my localization here for my computer is setting all of this stuff to inches, I'm just going to be working in inches. Now, if you really want to make this super dynamic for people across the pond, as well as those who are here, you can actually use unit from SEM. And unit from SEM, you can see right here, it converts the given SEM unit, which is 1/1000th of a millimeter, to the print unit, which is going to be in inches or millimeters. This is important in order to set property values independent of the print unit. So in this case, it's going to be in millimeters again, but 1/1000th of a millimeter. So I could do 25400, and you'll see down here, it's the same thing as if I had put 1 inch. If you happen to be writing reports or you're trying to sell to other people or something like that, this is absolutely positively the best way to write this. And if you don't care, you're just doing it for your shop, use whatever units you use. For the sake of this simplicity for this video, I'm just going to use 1. Now you'll see this drop down and my report container is actually hanging out below the page. That's because I didn't change my height. So instead of just being the full height of the printable area, I'm going to do a -1 here. And now my report container is still contained within the page here. So the next thing that we are going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and add some text up at the top. And so again, like I showed originally, just put some text in here, size it up, according to whatever, and I'm just going to put temp in here right now so I can close this window and I can go through here and do the same thing in these positionals as I did with the report container. So my printable area offset CX. For the left, for the top, I'm just going to paste it and change it to CY. And the width, if you want, you can actually just copy these values because you already set them up on the report container. Now the height is the one spot where I'm going to actually just force a number in this, because we know that I intentionally put a static value of 1 for the header height. I'm just going to type in 1. If you really wanted to get clever with this, you can go into project, you can create a user variable, you can add one, call it header height, click OK, and then just edit this and make it a 1. And now you have created a variable that you can reference. And so at this point, if you decided later that you wanted to change your report layout because you needed more space for your header, all you'd have to do is change the header height variable. And variables that you create, the user variables that we create under the project, are always referenced with an @ sign first, so @header height. And so again, for the text here, I can just make this now at header height. And to show you, let's just say, oh, I need more space for my header. I've got more stuff I want to put up there. Now you can just change that value in one location, and this dynamically changes, except for the fact that I did not completely set this up with my top. I forgot to put @header height here as well. So now the top will dynamically adjust with it as well. So I know that I don't want 2 inches of header height, so I'm going to go ahead and just change this back to a 1, and everything dynamically adjusts to the way you want it to. Now, when you double click on the text thing on the text box that we created here, you're not going to get back to the original interface that you saw when you first added text. In order to get back to that location or that window or that view, you have to actually double click on the value here, or I think maybe there's a way to edit it or something, but I just double click on it, right? So I'm going to go ahead and put @ if you scroll down through this list, you can get different options and stuff, but I don't actually want a variable that I created. I want a variable that we created outside of the report. You can see over here under this variables list, we have report underscore name. So if I just type report, even just repo, the IntelliSense is going to try to pick the only thing that it thinks I might possibly be trying to type. So if you just press, I think it's tab, it's going to fill it in with report name. And now you can see down here in the preview, it's room information because that's the name that we, or that's the value that we put in under the report name variable that we created. So click OK. Now, from here, there is an area where you can kind of set up some default information for your project. I candidly always kind of struggle with this, but default font for the report container, but I don't know if there's a default font for the text container. So you kind of have to just set these ones individually. Yeah, it doesn't look like there is a default font here. But I normally like to make the report name a little bit larger. And so you can do that by selecting the paragraph that you want to edit. And you can expand the font thing here, or you just click the A, the capital A, lowercase a, next to the default, which is Arial 12 point, which, by the way, this default should be getting based on some sort of information about, like, maybe it's under options here. Yeah, objects. So if you did want to set the default for everything in your report as a starting point, you would do that here under options and objects. And so let's say I want all of my default sizes to be 20, click OK. Everything is going to grow at the same time. I don't really want to do that, but I figured I would show that if you wanted to set your default font for everything, you could do that here. And you can change your, again, you can change your font, anything in the list, and any selections you make here are going to change the entire report until you start making individual overrides on your report container or your tables. So for here, I'm just going to make this a bit bigger and bold and underlined, I guess. So the next thing that I like to do, and I didn't set this up, so I'll walk you through it real quick. This won't take too long. You can set up system parameters at the splash screen. That will exist for everything in a given job. You do that by utilities, parameters. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new system parameter that's going to be the engineer's name. And so we'll set the prompt to be engineer name. The parameter is going to be II underscore engineer. You make this whatever you want, it doesn't matter. I use II as they are the initials of my consulting business, and I've just got into the habit of it. And then the type you want to set as a text because we're going to be typing somebody's name in here. And the default value, whatever value you enter here in this field is going to be the default value that shows up every time you make a new job. Or if it's a room parameter instead of a job, each new room would be defaulted with whatever value you've got here. But I'm going to set this up as if it's a job value. And what I recommend doing so that people on your team remember to enter something here is I put, either edit or enter engineer name or whatever. And then I normally set this up as a note because this is something you're going to set up one time at the beginning of your job. You're not going to be changing it often. So I don't like taking up the valuable real estate in the attributes bar by making it an attribute. So I'm going to show you why I just did that here in a second. So I'm going to go back into here. And when you add a parameter to, when you create a system parameter, but you've already got a job started up, you're not going to see that system parameter by default. It's not going to show up. What you have to do is click Utilities, Update Job, and then check the parameters box. Okay. Now, when you come to the job properties, because we made this a note, you'll see the notes tab here, which did not exist before. Now we've got engineer name, and it says enter engineer name. So I'm just going to put my name in. Okay, now why did I do this? Because I want that name to show up on my report. So I said we're not going to do a bunch of SQL, and we're not going to, but I do have to create one more small query in order to get that information into my job. So we're going to go back to report properties, tables. I'm going to make one more table. Now the notes, the system parameters that are set up as notes in a job are going to be under the notes table. And so again, you can just select them all, add them, and now we've got this showing up, right? Parent ID, parent type, prompt, engineer name, note, Brandon. Now, as you add more system parameters and you have more notes that you're adding to different products and parts and stuff like that, this simple query is not going to work anymore because it's going to pull all of the different notes. So the simplest way for you to filter for this is to use the where clause to target the prompt. And the way we do that is you just where notes dot prompt equals engineer name. So since we typed that correctly, we're basically saying I want to pull all the notes and all of this stuff from the table, from the notes table, but only the ones where the prompt is set as engineer name. So if I happen to have another note in the job, it's not going to show it. It's just going to be engineer name. Just going to be the notes where the prompt is set to engineer name. So now that I've created this table, I can reference that in my design. So in order to pull the information from a table that is in a text field that's not within the report container that contains the table, basically there's no data source, right? If I wanted to, sorry, there was no saying what source you want to go to. But the way that you can get that information to populate in here is by creating another user variable. So project user variables, we're just going to add another one. I'm going to call it engineer name. Okay, edit this value, and you can either drill down, in the fields and notes to the note, and you can like just double click it for notes.note, or if you happen to remember that that was the name of the field, you could just manually type it. So as you can see, now that it says notes.note, my name shows up, just click OK. And now anywhere you use the variable at engineer name, it's going to pull whatever value you've assigned for that. So I'm going to come back in here for my header, and we're going to add a new text field, and I'm just going to put at engineer. Again, once I started typing some of it, the IntelliSense knows or tries to show me the closest thing it thinks I might be trying to type. So if I just press tab, it's going to pull that in. Now, if it just says room information and then it says Brandon underneath it, that's a little bit confusing. So what I like to do is I like to put engineer :space and close it. And then whenever you're using like multiple fields or values or something in these text editors or these fields that you're trying to use, you always have to put a plus in between the fields. So now it says, engineer, Brandon. You could put, responsible engineer, or you could put project engineer, whatever makes the most sense to you. So now underneath the room information, you see that it says project engineer Brandon. Now, I would actually suggest that you do something like this, right? Room information report, or, you know, you could do report for room information or something like that, if room information itself is not enough information to make sense to you, but you don't have to, that's up to you. So normally I have this next field a little bit smaller. It's not as important as the title of the report. Not that the room information is necessarily super important, but I normally just have it like a little bit smaller. I don't really bold it. I don't really underline it. And then the next thing that I really like to do here is I like to have print date and page numbers. So if you create another one, another text field here by just double clicking on the 3 dots, printed on plus. Now we can come in here and use date functions. So you can do like date. You can do now, which is the current date and time, which I like. There's a lot of string stuff you can put in here to change the formatting here. You can, sorry. If you see the examples on the tab date format, then you can click date format. You can make your date display a little bit differently, right? So maybe you wanted to actually show the name of the day. Maybe you wanted to actually print out the month or something like that. If you want to do that, cycle through this list of whatever format that you like, and then you can just click insert. And, well, let me just, if you click insert here, right, now it's going to do the whole string of everything that you need. Now it says printed on Sunday, July 6th, 2025, right? Normally I make this a little bit smaller. And again, this is really preference. It's up to you. But what I also like to do is I normally create a little bit of space in between these top 2 things and the printed on field. And so what you can do is you can click on the field above and you can do paragraph space. No. Yes, you can. But it's in like decimals or whatever. So if you type in a number, you're going to create a bit of a gap here in between the 2 values. That's a little bit more than I wanted. So let's just do paragraph spacing at 12. And then normally I like to shove this over to the right-hand side of the report as well. So if you change your alignment from left to right, oh, no, sorry, wrong field. Left to right. Now it's kind of over here on the right-hand side, away from this. And then beneath this, I normally do page numbers. So again, if you search through this functions area, or you can just search for page, it's going to list the different functions that you can use for pages, right? So the simplest way to do this is to do current page as a string rather than the number, because we're going to be putting some other text in here. And so if you try to put a number like an integer value or a numeric value in the same field as a string value, Combit doesn't really like it. So you want this to be set up as a string. So we'll do page. And if you just leave the value empty, it shows up correctly. Or option, you can do an additional offset, right? So if you did like 10, it's going to offset the page by 10 pages. We don't really want that. We want it to be the current page. So plus space of space, and then total pages, which is going to be the return string will be the total number of pages when printing. So this shows up a little bit weird. It's got these little tilde symbols, and it shows 0. That's because there's only one page right now, and so it doesn't really know what it's going to be. But 1 of 0 is still a little bit misleading, so I like to do page space plus. So now it's page 1 of 0. And then again, I normally shrink this down a little bit and offset this to the right. So now we've got printed on and page numbers. And to be honest, I think I like it better with the page above the printed on. But that's just me. You can set this up however you want. So at this point, if you happen to have like several rooms and several pages, you're going to get this header printing on every single page. It's going to display the room information, who the project engineer is, what the page number is, and when it was printed. Anything that you put in this text box that you'd like to see on every page is going to show up on every page because it's just a static text box that prints on every single page. Now, if you didn't want it to show on every single page, then you could set up this appearance condition so that it doesn't show on every page, but I'm not going to try to get into that. We're already about an hour or so on the stream, and I'd like to move along here. So I'm going to briefly jump into this table. Now, we've got a header line, which is the room name, the room description, room number, all of these different things that we've selected. And then we've got data lines, which is actually containing the information that we decided we wanted to show up. So I don't really like that this is just room name smashed together. So we already know that this is a room information report. So I'm just going to take room off of this. I'm going to make it say name. And I'm going to do the same for the description. And for the room number, I'm going to go ahead and just put a space in there. And then I'm going to change this because ext asm fin probably isn't going to make sense to most people, even that use cabinet vision, let alone people who do not. So I'm just going to go ahead and change that to exterior finish. We're going to change this one to interior finish. Cabinet construction. So I don't know. I like that cabinet construction. That might tell whoever's looking at this whether it was set up as framed or Euro or frameless, whatever you want to call it, right? Drawer box construction. Drawer box materials. Okay, I'm just trying to create some space in here, make these read like something a little bit more normal, I guess, if you will. Now from here, you can kind of, depending on how much it bothers you, you'll notice these words are wrapping, right? The fields individually are set up to, the fit is set up to wrap. So what this means is if the text is too long for one line, it's going to wrap it down to the next line. Now, this works fine for the most part until you've got a situation like this where there's not enough space to actually read the whole word because the word is longer than the amount of space you've given it, and there's no spaces for it to wrap. So you can either give yourself plenty of space because drawer box construction is a pretty static value and that's not going to change, or another solution is that you can actually change the way these fields work. So here's a little trick that I learned recently. Thank you, Colby. This is a huge lifesaver. If you select multiple fields, you can change their information together all at once rather than clicking on an individual field and changing a value. So if I wanted to change this from wrap to shrink, now these are all basically, they're all going to stay on one line, but the information, the size of the font gets smaller. Now that's not very helpful for something like these where the font size is starting to get really, really tiny. But it is good to know about, because when you've got data that might be different lengths, but you're trying to keep your report layout a very specific way, it's nice to be able to set it up to shrink. You could also use compress, and that's going to keep everything as tall as it really can, but it's going to kind of compress the size of the letters, right? See how all of these are, they're kind of like compressed rather than scaled down in size. In this particular case, I'm just going to leave them on wrap. And again, this is a lot of information for a single report. This is probably not the best way to go about this, but I am going to go ahead and change the size to just be a little bit smaller. Now, this information here is the data line, like I said. There's nothing really to show about this for the most part. This is just the data selection that you've made within your room. But one thing I did want to point out is the room number is showing up with 2 decimal points. And unless you're going to have, well, it's not really possible in cabinet vision to have a room 1.2 or 1.3 by default. Like you would have to actually, you'd have to jump through some hoops to make it show the room description and name it that or something like that. So basically, room numbers in cabinet vision are always going to be integers or whole numbers. So to get rid of the 0.00, because it's honestly just kind of like ugly, I guess, you can change the format. So again, you select the field that you want to edit, come over here on the right-hand side, scroll down until you find format, which is under the appearance category, and click the 3 dots. And you change this to a number. And then if you select optimized decimal places, it's going to trim off any trailing zeros that exist on your decimal values. So now that room number changed, just not 1.00, now it's just 1, which is a bit tidier in general. Anyway, from here, blue cobalt, system amber, face frame, 5-piece drawer, you know, 1/2-inch 2-sided melamine rollout. All of these things are going to be just, they just are what they are because we're limited on our real estate within the report. So again, what you can do here for these values is you can just change this to be maybe a little smaller. But we still have some things that are word wrapping, so there's not a whole lot you can do about it. Now, room number, you could shrink down because you know that the data and room number is never really going to be much bigger than that. But like name and description, you might actually want a little bit bigger, for example. So you just got to kind of pick and choose what works best for you. But you can, as you can see, you can kind of click on these columns and individually stretch these. If you have this change width individually selected, what happens when you change the size of a column is it shrinks the column or grows the column itself, and it adds the difference to the adjacent column. So you'll notice cabinet construction is going to get wider when I reduce the size of interior finish without changing the overall size of everything. Whereas before I had without change width individually selected, what happens is when you change the size of a column, it actually reduces just that column and the entire, I don't want to call it container because that's the report container, but the entire table itself actually shrinks in overall width. In other words, only the column, this is kind of confusing because it says change width individually, right? And right now, I would say that right now I'm probably changing widths individually more than what it feels like with this selected. But if you have this selected, you're going to change the width of 2 columns at the same time. You're going to change the column you're adjusting and the adjacent column. So what's this line down here that's just a bunch of gray boxes, right? This is the footer line. So if for some reason you wanted to sum up the total number of rooms, you could leave this here. I'm going to argue that it's probably not important to do. Maybe it is. Maybe you do something with your business where you'd really like to see the total number of rooms. But right now the placement is kind of confusing because it's showing up underneath the room description. So I would just shift that down one so that it's underneath the room number. But realistically, I would probably do something more like this. I would just delete all of these extra columns. And here I would do something like total number of rooms. So now this column here is going to say total number of rooms, and the one next to it is going to be the actual value. So then from here, I would use change which individually. Now, you're going to notice if you click this column, it's going to actually shift the room and room number field up above it as well, which is not what we want. If you only want to change the size of this one individual column down here, you can hold Control, click on that column, and now you'll notice the dotted line or bounding box or whatever you want to call it is only on this actual one single section. So if you drag this all the way near the right hand side, it's going to snap to the outside of the container or to whichever column you're closest to. Notice it's kind of snapping into place there as I move back and forth. So come all the way out over here. And we don't need all of this space for this, but I did that so that I could actually now come in here and change the total number of rooms column and slide it over. And then here, I'm going to, one more thing, I'm actually going to delete this column as well. Move this out, bring this one over here, and then I'm going to change my alignment from left to right. And now down here at the bottom of everything, I'm going to have total number of rooms 0. So the last thing that I would suggest you do with this is if you select both of these rows, you can actually come down here to your frame and you can change the frame. If you click on the field and then the 3 dots over here, you can change the way the borders work for this. So I would actually like to see a black line that's kind of dividing these 2 sections from the list of my rooms and my footer. And so what you do is you change the color to black. And then if you want, just a regular line, you can select this and click on the top twice. Because the first time I actually removed it, the second time added it. Click OK. And now you see you've got like a black line that shows up between these 2 things. If you wanted to actually create some space between them, then you can come in here and in the top, you can put, let's just say 1/8 of an inch or something at the top of the line definition for your footers. And now, as you can see, there's a clear gap in between these 2. It kind of helps separate it out a little bit, right? So we've got a pretty basic report here. Generally speaking, like I said, you're going to want to have margins showing here, and most printers will show up by default with a margin. Oh, why is this showing off to the left? Something seems a little bit strange. I don't really like how this is hanging out off to the left. It might just be a visual thing that I'm seeing here, but I'm going to just shift each of these over a little bit because it's bothering me. All right, now that looks a little better. And so basically you've got a room report. It's going to tell you who the engineer was, what page it is, what day it was printed on, and it's going to give you some basic material about the room itself. And then it's going to give you a total number of rooms down at the bottom. So if we save this and close it and return to the report center, now when we select this rooms report, you're going to see room 1, this is the information for it. Room 2, this is the information for it. But, we've got 3 total rooms, even though there's only 2 shown here. That is going to be because we summed the room numbers. 1 plus 2 equals 3. So how do we get around that? Back into the design report. Rather than using sum, we've got, let's see, do we have count? Count. So instead of sum, maybe we just need to change this to count. And what are the options? So false would reset the value stored for the calculation after output, or would not reset the value stored. True would. That's a function that's going to work a bit more with like group footers than footers, because we've only got 1 footer line showing here. So I'm just going to leave it as false, but let's see. Actually, one other thing I didn't like about this was that it was showing 3.00. So I'm going to change the format of this to a number with optimized decimal places, and then I'm going to click OK. So now what we should see is 2 rooms. We've got 2 rooms, room 1, room 2. Right, here's all the information, individual room numbers, and just to show, if you wanted to create some additional rooms, let's call this the kitchen. Butler's pantry, mud room. Now when you go to the report center and to rooms, right, we've got 6 total rooms, which you can see here. Each one has its own individual room number. Now, obviously, because I copied room 2, all of the information for room 2 stayed exactly the same. But again, you can see that there's plenty of room name. It only showed the project engineer once. And I'll do one more thing here to kind of demonstrate. Let's change the size of the data lines. Just going to make this way bigger than it needs to be, which means that we're going to lose a lot of the information in here. Why did that not do anything? I see, because I did not leave these as default font. Yes, now they're going to follow the line definition. There we go. So obviously this is way too big for anybody to read, but I wanted to show how once you get to page 2, you'll actually see page 2 of 2. Right, page 1 of 2, page 2 of 2, so on and so forth. So, what you are also going to notice here, by the way, is because we set this up so that the footer is printing at the end of the data, it's not waiting till it only prints on the last page. There's a total number of rooms 3 on this page, total number of rooms 6 on this page, which can be a little bit confusing. So what you can do is you can change your appearance condition on this. So you can write, well, I was going to show you how to write a formula, but they've already got this built in, last page only. So now the footer will only show up on the last page of your report, which is helpful because it was kind of confusing before seeing, paid, 3 rooms total here, and then down at the bottom, 6 total. And what that also did was it let us fit 1 more row of room information in here on the first page, but total number of rooms 6. So there you have it. Not the most useful report the way it's laid out necessarily, but hopefully this gives you guys a little more insight into how Combit works, some of the ways that you can use some of the tools to make changes in a variety of different ways, and how you can really get your data to show up the way that you want it to. So yeah, I hope that I hope the stream has been enjoyable. I hope that you learned something from this. And 2 more things before I go. One, a good friend of mine and a community legend has been sharing recently that they are going through some health issues. And anybody who happens to spend any time on the Discord server probably knows who I'm referring to, and I'll help them maintain their privacy. I'm not going to share their name, but just want to let you know, man, I hope that you're pulling through. I think that everybody in the community is also cheering you on. And if there's anything any of us can do, reach out and let us know. You mean a lot to the community, and you've done a lot over the years. And I think everybody feels the same way. So best of luck to you. And I hope that you recover soon and you get back into the Discord server and e-support, because those 2 places just don't feel the same without you. And the second thing is that if you liked the stream and you'd like to know more about cabinet vision, or really anything related to woodworking and coding, report building, anything really about cabinet vision in general, then come check out our Discord server. It's a Woodworking Wizards and Code Crafters Consortium. I will put a link up in the video description when this is uploaded to YouTube, and hop on in, set your role, and ask some questions. We would love to see you there. And yeah, I guess that's it. Thanks for watching.